This is the Outlap F1 podcast featuring America's own Cody, Andy, and Deanna. Your one-stop shop for Formula One news, insights, race previews, and reviews. Join us on the Outlap. Formula One, yet again, proving the old adage that just when you think you know, you probably don't really know. You have found the Outlap F1 podcast. This will be season 7. This will be episode number 7. It's our 2025 Japanese GP review show. You've got Andy, and I'm along with, he is grinning from ear to ear tonight, folks. A very happy Cody tonight. We're going to talk about wine in just a little bit, but sir, how's it hanging otherwise?
It's going great. I am very happy I got to see Max doing his very best stuff this weekend. And I was even okay with doing it in the middle of the night. I was cheering for the whole neighborhood at, was that about 2 in the morning when Max got that pole that we're going to talk about, because it was just that awesome. But yeah, great time, great weekend.
Yeah, I love it when I get the chance to wake up my entire building with Formula One stuff and nobody has any idea. Like, what is he doing over there? Watching my F1, watching the F1, of course. And if you are a follower and a watcher of the F1 and you have found our show, welcome along, as many would say. You can find us, as always, on Blue Sky, X, Instagram, Discord, every now and again on Reddit, but also here on YouTube at Outlap F1 Podcast is the handle for all of that. You can see our link tree as to the different channels and where you can find our content. If you are on YouTube and you like what you're seeing and you enjoy what you're hearing, if you want to click either a like or the subscribe button, and if you're on your favorite podcasting app, a 5-star review will definitely help us out in order to get our content to you that much a little bit quicker, if you'd like to do that. You can email the show either chatnow@outlapf1.com or our home email address, which is outlapf1@gmail.com. The chat now is supposed to forward it to the Outlap F1. So if it doesn't work on that one, just send it to the home address and we'll definitely get it. Outlap F1 Nation, who continues to support the show, thank you so much to Dean Warwick, Yuri Dolchester, Paul Weaver, Quentin Warden, Kevin Kelly, Regan Stanzik, Timothy Brown, and of course Jonathan Scott. Kevin Kelly on our little group chat after the end of the race said that race was so one word descriptor, he had to stop. He just had to keep on drinking. So Kevin has had himself quite the night. But a shout out to you as a supporter of all things F1 and being up late along with the rest of us. If you'd like to become a member of that hashtag Outlap F1 Nation, and you can see our anchor page. It is an ask for some funds. If you'd like to do that, $1, $5. Why do we ask for that? What does that do? It helps us keep our technology as relevant as we can, allows us to use this lovely recording platform that we're on, and allows us to try to make the show better. So that's all we're basically trying to do with that. I'm just going to paraphrase Oscar Piastri for our headline of the day. I thought he summed it up brilliantly in the cool down room, and he pretty much said, quote, "For a race that felt pretty much flat out, nothing really happened." Yeah, that's courtesy of Oscar Piastri, and at least for the race on Sunday, I agree with him. Suzuka, while it is an iconic and wonderful and amazing track, and the Saturday qualifying was absolute chef's kiss, the race was probably a bit hard to watch, especially if you weren't watching from the onboards. It was a completely different perspective to watch it just on the TV feed alone versus the TV feed with the onboard. So we're going to talk about all of that in a little bit. Cody, what is your headline of the day?
It is the return of the king. It only took us till the 3rd race weekend in the season for Max Verstappen to upset the McLarens and get a very unexpected pole position as well as the race win. So yeah, I can come away from this one happy that it was boring, because there was one part that we're going to get to in the race where I was kind of like, oh no, it's going to go away, and it didn't. So actually, considering that it was pretty boring, I was actually pretty tense throughout the whole race, because I mean, we're going to just be up front here. Max won the race and it was awesome, but he never really got further than 2 seconds away from Lando. And that had me kind of sitting on the edge of my seat being like, okay, come on, like open up the gap a little so I can breathe. And it never happened. In fact, it kind of went the other way. So I was on the edge of my seat despite the fact that nothing was happening.
Yeah, I mean, it really was a race that, depending on what your perspective was and what you were paying attention to, they were going flat out. There is not a doubt in my mind, after watching both Lando and Oscar's onboards, that both of those guys were, if there was pace, they were trying to use it. Same thing with Max. We're going to talk about how Max kind of set up his car for the qualifying and what he did versus what his new teammate did in terms of downforce levels and just we're going to get into all that in a little bit, but I don't want to get all technical before we get into the fun of the qualifying recap. So we had the first 3 practice sessions, and I would say the headline out of the first 3 practice sessions was, one, Jack Doohan had himself a really nasty looking crash that cost Alpine one of their chassis. They had to get the spare chassis out. We will talk about what led to that. And 2, my other headline before the race on Sunday, or before the qualifying, would have been the grass is on fire, because the grass kept catching on fire and they kept having to stop the session. So it was a very interrupted FP1 and FP2 and FP3 sessions. But that led into a qualifying, and we had one delay for the grass catching on fire in qualifying as well. But that qualifying saw the following. Of course, we give this guy compliments in our last review, and then he goes and does this. Lance Stroll, no better than P20 on the weekend. Yikes. P19 was Jack Doohan. We will definitely talk about his adventure. P18 was Esteban Ocon. P17 was Gabriel Bortoleto. And P16 was Nico Hulkenberg. P15, new team, not really all that much better. Was good in Q1. He was right on Max for a while, and then it faded away. We'll talk about what we think why. Yuki Tsunoda in the Red Bull. P14, out qualifying the guy in the car that he just got ousted from, Liam Lawson in the Racing Bull. Interesting there. P13, Fernando Alonso. P12 was Carlos Sainz. However, he would not stay there. He was given a 3-place grid penalty for impeding Lewis Hamilton during Q1. P11 was Pierre Gasly, and P10, I thought one of the standouts of the weekend. We will talk about his weekend for sure. Oliver Behrman in the Haas. Good going there. P9 was Alex Albon in the Williams. Williams, again, 3 races, 3 Q3 appearances. That's becoming a trend. P8 was Lewis Hamilton. P7, you had to feel for this guy. All males on the planet should feel for this guy, and how he pushed through is kind of amazing. Isaac Hadjar in the other Racing Bulls in Q3 qualifies in P7 ahead of his hero and ahead of Lewis Hamilton in the Ferrari. P6, Kimi Antonelli. Just kind of going under the radar here, but he's put together some solid efforts early. P5 looked to be the primary challenger of the McLarens early, faded a bit in Q3. That was George Russell. P4, probably getting the most, I think, out of the cars, what they could offer this weekend, was Charles Leclerc on the Ferrari. P3 was Oscar Piastri. P2 was Lando Norris, who I thought pulled it out at the end. And then the Max factor happened. Max Verstappen with one of, I think we're going to talk about this lap for a very long time, 126.983, a new track record in the Red Bull that literally has no business being there. Wow. All right, Cody, it's your time to shine here. Tell us about the Max lap.
It was probably one of the best qualifying laps that I've ever seen. And I did watch the Max Verstappen gets pole at Monaco lap as well. So this was fantastic. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time it was happening because Max didn't look like he was going to be that competitive this weekend. Through all the practice sessions and even through Q1 and Q2, he was doing okay, but nothing really to write home about. I thought that this was going to be an easy McLaren runs off with it. And, it looked like Lando Norris at first in Q3 had a little bit of a hard time putting together like the great lap. Oscar Piastri actually had a better lap than that on like the earlier runs in Q3. And then it comes down to the final runs. And Lando puts together a great lap. He gets, I believe it was a purple sector 1, greens, so personal bests for sectors 2 and 3, puts it on provisional pole. And they pan to Max as he's going and completing his second sector, and he's on personal bests for sector 1 and sector 2. And it says he's only, I forget how much it was. It was only like a few hundredths, like maybe like 800ths of a second or something like that off of Lando. And I was thinking, oh my God, he might actually be able to do it. And yeah, when he comes over the line and beats out Lando by, what was it, like 12 thousandths of a second?
12 thousandths of a second, yep.
Yeah, I actually cheered. It didn't matter how late it was. I'm sorry if I woke up my wife, but it was really amazing. And then I was kind of still on the edge of my seat because Oscar Piastri was coming around to finish his lap, and he actually managed a purple sector 2 and a purple sector 3 on his final run, but still missed out and actually qualified third because he did not get a personal best in sector 1. I don't know if, what happened, if he just made a minor mistake or didn't get it quite nailed on as well. But this results in Max having the oddity of not getting any purple sectors on his pole lap time. He just was good enough across all 3 sectors that he just barely eked it out. And, this goes to show just how well, we've said it many times, how Max can drag any car into competition, because this car did not look the best at all this weekend. And he just kind of seemed to pull it out of nothing at the very end on that last run. He even said it, I think, during one of his interviews, that he felt like he was going to crash like 5 different times during that lap. And all I can think of is he's just got to be sitting there going, well, this is my last chance. I might as well go for it, especially if he's looking at his deltas going into that third sector. He's like, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen now. I might as well just push it that little extra bit and see what happens. And yeah, he managed to eke it out. Very popular. And my favorite part of the whole thing is Max tends to, be fairly collected on the radio when he does great. And it's probably because he's had some really dominant seasons where he got used to getting lots of poles and getting lots of wins and just saying, oh, it was simply lovely over the radio. But you could tell that this one was really special because he actually cheered with like enthusiasm over the radio after they told him he got the pole, and seemed actually a little bit at a loss for words, which I thought was really cool that he was that excited about it and it meant that much to him, because he must have known that he really hooked up what was, I guess, almost a perfect lap.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, the setup changes that Red Bull had done over the course of the weekend, if you compare just the rear wing levels between what Max's wing looked like and his teammate looked like going into qualifying, they had mentioned it on the broadcast that, it was slightly different. No, it looked like half a wing type of difference. Max's rear wing looked like something you would see in Monza. Yuki's rear wing looked like something you would see in Monaco. So Yuki was definitely being a lot more conservative, not wanting to crash the car in his first weekend, just get through, and I'm going to kind of be where I'm going to be. And it clearly translated in the lap time for Max, because where he was beating the McLarens were on the straights and the hairpin were the 2 spots that he was able to somehow pull back just enough lap time to get in front of the McLarens. The McLarens and the S's were fairly dominant throughout the course of the weekend. And even in bits of Sector 2 were pretty good. If they could nail the Degners, they were getting a lot of good lap time out of it, but sometimes Lando and even Oscar would go over it and, would kind of mess up the lap a little bit. That's one of the reasons why Lando's first attempt was not so good. He ran a little bit wide at Degner 2, and that caused him to now have to do the 1 lap with all the pressure. And he goes out there, and I'm watching it on the timing, and I'm like, okay, there's the first purple sector, which we kind of knew was going to happen. And I'm like, okay, get through the Degners. And he got through the Degners, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be good. And then he comes up, and he takes pole away from Oscar. I'm like, at the time, it was the first lap into the 126s, and you almost sit back and you go, okay, And I'm looking at Max, and I was not discounting it. And one of the themes that I've said throughout the course of the season was going to be Max factor. What could he do just because he is who he is? And I'm watching this timing, and I'm like, okay, Lando's got him in sector 1. Lando's still got him in sector 2, which is where the hairpin is, which I'm like, okay, if that was going to be where Max was going to get him, it was going to be through that section. And I kind of even sat back a little bit in my chair, like, okay, he's probably going to get third, and it's going to be a nice lap, but we're gonna be okay. And then I just see him, he crosses the line and he goes up to the top step, and I was literally sitting there going, how did he do that? Wait a minute, how did he do that? So for 4 minutes after the qualifying ends, while meanwhile they're lining up on the interviews, I'm not paying attention to that. I'm digging into the timing. I'm like, where did he pull that out? And it turns out 500ths in sector 3 over Lando. So that's where you're coming into the heavy braking zone. You're taking curbs on both sides of the car. And he definitely, everybody had taken a very aggressive line on the inside coming to the start or to the finish line. We were talking, when you look at the ghost car comparison, if that's a finish line and a start line, if it's a start/finish line at the end of the pit lane, that's Lando's pole. if it's where it ended, it's Max's pole. But all that having been said, I thought up until now, 2022 Monaco, Max down by 0.3 going into the last sector, pulls it out and pulled 0.2 on Fernando Alonso, was probably the best qualifying effort I'd ever seen, just because of the lack of area to make up that kind of lap time.
Mhm.
This is probably just as good over the course of one whole lap. So it is going to be a lap that's right up there with, I think, Singapore and Lewis Hamilton a few years ago. It's going to be one of those all-time ones that we're going to look back on and go, how the hell did he do that?
Yeah, it's not like he kind of stole it away by Lando or Oscar making a mistake either.
No.
They had excellent lap times. I mean, Lando's lap time, I think, would have beat the track record anyway, and he just barely got pipped. So I think it makes it all the sweeter that it was completely on merit and that it was up against pretty much the best on offer from the McLarens, and just managed to get it anyway.
Yeah. So I even said, I mean, what else can you do? You just tip your cap. Just say, okay, you got that one. I can't complain. Had it only been the first run where Lando made the mistake, I always, you're always sitting there going, oh man, what could have been? Could he have done this? Yeah, I got no question there, because they both managed to put all three of them put together really awesome Q3 laps when you think about it, over the course of that session there. Some other honorable mentions. One, we got to talk about Isaac Hadjar, who's how he managed not to be on the radio 3 octaves higher in his voice is kind of amazing. Like I was saying before, all the male fans out there should, one, sympathize, empathize, and feel really bad for what Isaac Hadjar had to go through, especially in Q1, where a certain part of him was a little constricted by the belts. Let's say that way. I think that's how even he put it. And he managed to go out and get out of Q1 with that. And all I got to say is, dude, mass respect. I don't really know what else to say about that, but other honorable mentions: Oliver Behrman getting Haas into Q3 for I think the second consecutive race, especially after their really bad start in Melbourne. And comparing Behrman to where his much more experienced teammate is, 8 places higher is mentionable for sure. Also, Alex Albon getting Williams into Q3, 3 races, 3 Q3 appearances. Like I said before, that's a trend. And Kimi Antonelli, the guy that you're not really paying attention to, doing okay, doing just fine, it seems, in the Mercedes. Cody, any other big thoughts?
Yeah, my same feelings towards Isaac Hadjar for somehow going out there and putting in a good qualifying lap with his, family jewels all crunched up in his seatbelt. I can't imagine like going into that, like feeling that discomfort. And these guys are on like pretty much like autopilot, right? They tell him to leave the garage and they go. And you got to imagine he's sitting there going like, what have I done? There's nothing I can do about it now. I just, and he did sound a little, not quite panicked on the radio, but getting there being like, guys, like we really have to do something about this. I'm having the same problem as before. Can I jump out of the car after this run?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, going into that first braking zone, he must have been sitting there like rolling his eyes, being like, oh my God. But
there's a shot of him in the garage where they do the camera right at his face and his eyeballs are almost coming out of his head. It's just like when you found out what happened, you're like, oh, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry there, son. Be okay. Please be okay. And just one last thing before we leave qualifying. For all of the fanfare and the hype of the Yuki Tsunoda versus Liam Lawson story, P14 and P15 respectively, kind of a dud. And oh yeah, Liam Lawson outqualified the guy who replaced him at Red Bull. Interesting.
It doesn't look great either way there, though, because Yuki's really far back there, and he looked like he was doing okay throughout the weekend up until getting knocked out in Q2. For that matter, like Liam Lawson, we were all thinking he might be doing a lot better in that RB car, which has looked pretty strong throughout the first couple races. He still only qualified 14th, so not really a great look on either one of them. I'm willing to still give them both the benefit of the doubt because Liam's in that car for the first time this season and Yuki's in the Red Bull for the first time this season. Like they still got kinks to work out, but was really hoping to see a good showing from Yuki on home turf. I guess the last thing, it didn't really happen during qualifying, but Jack Doohan did have that really nasty crash during practice at the end of the only DRS zone on the track. So pretty much going the fastest you're going to go on the track. I guess his DRS didn't close going into that first turn, which my understanding from what I've heard is that is kind of intentional. I think the DRS closes automatically once you start applying the brake, right? And he was trying to go flat out through there, and it didn't close because of that. And
yeah, he was. So Jack Doohan's obviously done a lot of time in the simulator, and it was kind of a story we put in the preview, and we were kind of half joking about it that Jack Doohan's been replaced for FP1. But it turned out to be actually quite the thing as it turned out, because he doesn't get the FP1 session under his belt, so he can't calibrate. It's a new surface. And he tried a trick that apparently works in the simulator, but as we saw in real life was something very different, where what he was trying to do was he wasn't even on the brakes. He was just trying to air brake into the first turn to leave the DRS open a little bit longer to try to eke out some extra top speed going into that first turn. And he got bit. I mean, I don't really know how else to say it. The car literally did a whole 180 and ended up going back end into the barriers. Looked like a very scary crash. Car was in many, many pieces parts. They had to chuck the chassis and basically build up their spare chassis between FP2 and FP3. He's lucky he made it out for qualifying, and quite honestly. And I think it was just, everyone's kind of said this is just a mistake that he made, and obviously, hopefully he'll learn from it. But as we have also said, his replacement is standing over his shoulder, looking down at him, and there's Flavio looking down at him too. So the pressure continues to amp up for Jack Doohan. And I did see a video. I don't know how verified it is, but it looked like Franco Colapinto was testing an Alpine in Monza earlier today. So let that sink in there. So yeah, going to be a lot more pressure on Jack Doohan. Obviously, the one thing he needed was track time, and the one thing he cost himself and his team didn't do him any favors either was practice time. Not that it really mattered, because we had so many freaking grass fires, especially in FP2. It almost got comical where I'm like tweeting out and I'm going, red flag. Guess why? Yet again. So apparently it was very, very dry in Japan. And the grass literally, because of these titanium planks that, you see, especially in the night races, you see the sparks and all that stuff. You'll see it in Bahrain for sure next weekend. Was literally the embers were flying through the air and catching on fire. And once the grass caught fire, it spread quickly. So,
really fast.
yeah, I mean, one good job by the marshals to get it calmed down. But the only thing they could do during the practices was halt the session, throw a red flag, get everybody in the pits, and then go out and take care of it. They did try to they did try to cut the grass super, super short. And then it still happened in FP3. And fortunately for the race, the rain that we thought we were going to get happened in the morning. It was still damp to where even though the track had dried out by the time the race started, but it was damp enough and cool enough to where nothing luckily happened during the race. So there was not a safety car that was needed. Any other thoughts on qualifying? Notice we're talking a lot about qualifying because the race
the interesting
is
part of the weekend.
Zip
Yes,
pretty much quick.
No, I think you pretty much nailed all of it.
Okay.
We did get the one fire during qualifying, and at that point, I was wondering, like, man, if they don't get any rain, like, what the hell are they going to do? Like during the race, are they going to have to red flag it because we're getting fires during the race? Like that could really throw people's sequences for a loop. And yeah, fortunately, as you said, since the rain came early and dampened everything up, it ended up being a non-issue. But it kind of makes you wonder if they're going to take any measures to try to prevent that in the future, or if it's just kind of a one-off thing because it just happened to be dry. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. What did Ted Kravitz say? Like they were filling cones and buckets and
Try to
anything they
rain
could.
water down on the areas.
Yeah, like anything they could find to wet down the grass, and it did look pretty parchy. I mean, I'll have to admit, and it was, but it's fleeting because like when I went to COTA this October, it looked like that. It was that kind of brown. It had been very, very droughty. When I saw the race for MotoGP, which was at Circuit of the Americas just a couple weeks ago, all that grass was now lush green because it's done a lot of raining in that part of the world over the course of it. So it doesn't take much to fix that problem, climate-wise, but it was just a kind of an odd thing. Not anything I think anybody had in their bingo cards going into this weekend for sure, was that we were going to have 4 red flags during practices for grass fires. But anyway, all right, so the great qualifying, which got everybody all hyped up, was leading into the race. And then, look, we're just going to be honest with it. The race probably lacked some of the drama. It was, in a lot of ways, kind of a procession. That doesn't mean the drivers weren't trying hard. That doesn't mean that things weren't on the edge. Doesn't mean that there wasn't tension, but we will get into all that in just a minute. But we're going to start with the back markers. And again, we give this guy a bit of praise, and look what he does with it. Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin, just a weekend to forget, does not get any better than P20 and is the only car to finish one lap down on the leader. P19 was Gabriel Bortoleto. P18 was Esteban Ocon. P17 was Liam Lawson in the Racing Bull. P16 was Nico Hulkenberg. P15 was Jack Doohan. P14 was Carlos Sainz. And P13 in the back markers finishes Pierre Gasly. Cody, any big thoughts here in the back markers? Not a whole lot of screen time for these guys because not a whole lot going on.
Oh, it wasn't. So I guess something to talk about for just the race in general here is how hard it was to pass during this race. Everyone pretty much maintained their position at the start, and really wasn't a whole lot of moving around throughout the race because since a pretty good portion of the track had been resurfaced, the tire degradation was greatly reduced. So I guess this race, Suzuka is typically a 2-stop. Pretty much everyone went with the 1-stop on this. There was a point during the race where Lando's engineer came over the radio and said, no one is seeing graining on any of the tire compounds. You're good to push. And that's really what it was, is there was no tire fall off. So you didn't really get the opportunity to pass based on having fresher tires or a better compound than the person in front of you. On top of that, There's only one DRS zone around Suzuka. It's down that front stretch. So it's right after a pretty low speed section coming out of that chicane and
Yep.
the final turn coming into that straight. So you don't really get as big an advantage from that either. Those things combined, and the fact that, at least with the front runners that we're going to get to, they pretty much were all on more or less the same age tires and the same compounds throughout the race. Even though there were pretty small gaps between a lot of the drivers, wasn't really a whole lot of opportunity to pass. You had to really, really get up close to the person in front of you so that you could get it done on that DRS section, which is where we were seeing most of the passing. But yeah, it was just a really rough for passing. And this is the third race of 3 this season where the pole sitter has taken the win. I think Lando had to work the hardest for that one, but Max didn't really have to work too hard, which I thought was, I mean, they were all flat out, but he didn't really have to drive defensively, is what I mean, to keep the cars behind him. I know we're talking about the back markers, but I can't pass up Max.
Oh, no. I mean, it was a trend throughout. And I think there were a total of, 4 on-track passes, and 3 of them were in the DRS zone. And what you basically had to do was you had to have a delta of close to like 6 or 7 tenths just coming down the straight in order to really pull those sorts of moves off. Like, I know Carlos Sainz had one on track. But again, when you can count them on one hand, that tells you something. It also tells me that the resurfacing, look, Japan has the right to resurface their racetrack, and Suzuka can totally do that. But what I think Pirelli had anticipated going into this race was the typical 2-stop, hardest compound of tires available, maximum tire stress, maximum deg that we were going to see. And you took the part of the first, the starting straight and the S's that does the most damage to the tires, and you've resurfaced it. And you've taken all of that bite, at least in year 1, out of the track. And so you ended up with Kimi Antonelli at one point running with a 35-lap medium stint to open the race, which was not anything that Pirelli had predicted. When they came out, they said first stops were supposed to be between lap 15 and 20, and then the second stop was supposed to be around lap 39 with about maybe 15 to go. So, but what you never got that drop off. Like, even on the Antonelli 35-lap stint on fresh, hard tires that both Max, Lando, and Oscar had, they were only pulling like 0.6 of a second a lap back on Antonelli. It almost felt like at some point you could have done the Nico Rosberg come in on lap 1, throw the set of hards, and wait to see if they drop off type of situation. I mean, it was kind of going in that direction. So I think Pirelli kind of got not screwed over, but I think they were in a no-win situation because they anticipated a deg level being one spot, and then it clearly wasn't. And again, I don't want to fault Suzuka for resurfacing their track. Obviously, they thought they needed to do it, and obviously for the long-term longevity of that facility, it's a good thing to do. But in this circumstance with these cars where clean air is such the priority, as we are seeing, it is like being on the upper level of the gunfight. And if you're down here and the guy with the clean air is up here, he's got so much of an advantage. It just did not promote a whole lot of overtaking, and there wasn't any tire offset that could necessarily get there either. So we saw a lot of running around. We saw a lot of hard racing. We saw a lot of people trying to eke out laps, but especially when we get to the front, where we'll talk about is, there was a rubber band of, we get in, we get almost to DRS, and then something would happen. And then we get almost to DRS, and then something would happen. And then even the guys who got into DRS really couldn't set up a move unless it was right there for the taking. So even if you were in the outer like 8 tenths, you weren't gonna pull a move off. You're in DRS, that's great, but you were gonna get to within 3-4 tenths, and that was about as close as you were gonna get. But anyway, I don't really have much to talk about here on the back markers.
The only other thing that I would say out of this is we did have some pretty stark contrast between performance of drivers in the same team. I got Lance Stroll 9 positions off of Fernando
Yep.
Alonso. You got Esteban Ocon finishing something like 30 seconds behind Oliver Behrman. You got Liam Lawson finishing like 45 seconds behind Isaac Hadjar. And Carlos Sainz, uh, finishing back in 14th, while Alex Albon still surprising all of us and being the big Williams point scorer so far. Definitely some good runs and poor runs within the same team from this race.
Yeah. So I guess we'll just talk about we'll just give you the midfield results. P12 was Yuki Tsunoda. P11 was that aforementioned Fernando Alonso. P10, Oliver Behrman in the Haas, getting a solitary point for that team. Big things for them. P9 was Alex Albon. P8 was Isaac Hadjar, feeling much better in the car on Sunday than he did on Saturday for sure. P7 was Lewis Hamilton, who did probably, I think, have the overtake of the day, if there was such a thing, on Isaac Hadjar. P6 was Kimi Antonelli. P5, we'll just kind of have to talk about the disappearing Mercedes pace, because they look really good in practice and they just didn't go anywhere. That was George Russell. And P4, like I said, probably getting the most they could at this point out of their car and their package versus what they had, especially what they had to compromise after China, was Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. I think you mentioned it before, the contrast between the less experienced drivers and the more experienced drivers on certain teams, with the exception of Ollie Behrman and the exception of Isaac Hadjar. Some rookies were doing okay, some were not. So I think if you're saying that this was the driver's track, maybe this is a decanting on driver skill at this point.
Yes, and some of like you said, some of those rookies coming in and really showing their stuff after retiring before the race even got started in Australia. It's really good to see Isaac Hadjar making a good comeback, showing his stuff, getting good points for that Racing Bulls team.
His first points in Formula One.
Yeah, exactly. Outdoing his teammate, who is now his fresh teammate in that seat. But Liam Lawson does have some experience in Racing Bulls. A little different car last year, I suppose, but was expecting to see them maybe be a little bit closer in this race, especially since Liam Lawson is known to have quite a bit of experience racing around here, especially from his time racing in Super Formula. Yuki Tsunoda, all things considered, I think probably had a decent weekend for his first time in the Red Bull.
Yeah.
I was hoping that he would come into the seat and really show at least pretty well, so that it would, kind of silence all the haters that he's got who are thinking, oh, maybe Liam should have stayed in the seat. And for that point, I think actually they should have kept Liam in the seat longer, gave him a better shot. But what's done is done. So you really hope Yuki comes into this and succeeds. And it was lukewarm qualifying. It might even be a little generous for, going out in P15. Did make up a few spots, but still missed out on the points. So it does show just how difficult it is to drive that car, even with Yuki using what was probably a more forgiving setup on the car. We'll just have to hope that he improves from here.
Yeah, there's a stat that's pretty telling. Do you know who the actual number 2 point scorer is for all Red Bull teams at this point?
The number 2 point scorer
behind Max Verstappen. So
Max has Sebastian.
No, not of all time. Not of all time.
Oh, okay.
In 2025.
Oh, who is the second best Red Bull scorer?
Yeah.
It's probably got to be Yuki Tsunoda, right?
It is Isaac Hadjar with the 4
between all their teams
today.
Okay.
So in the Red Bull family, he has 4, Yuki has 3. So there's Max on where he is with 61. Hadjar with 4, Yuki with 3, and Liam with none. It's the cringing is not going to stop, at least over the course of this week, at least for one more race. I have a funny feeling, but yeah.
That's a brutal one.
A team that I think was just trying to get through this weekend and probably get to Bahrain where they can make some changes to their car, I think was Ferrari. Both Hamilton and Leclerc have said, because of the the respective disqualifications that they were running with their setup kind of compromised. Lewis's car not as close to the ground because they were worried about the plank wearing again. So they didn't want to take the chance. So they kind of compromised some of their speed, and hence Hamilton only qualifies in P8 and only manages to get P7. Although, again, I thought of the overtakes that we saw, all four of them, Lewis's on Hadjar was probably the best one going down the main straight there. All right. Any other thoughts in the midfield before we focus on the race for the win?
No, because most of the exciting stuff really was happening with those front three.
Yeah, so if there was tension and drama, it definitely was amongst the three cars in front. Max Verstappen versus both McLarens. P3 coming home unable to get any better than where he qualified was Oscar Piastri in the first McLaren. P2 was Lando Norris in the second McLaren, unable to improve from his starting position. And P1, riding the clean air pretty much all the way to the victory, was Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. 1.4 seconds, the margin of victory, although Lando had an off on the very last lap. So it may have been a little bit closer, but it's a race where if you just watched it on TV, you're probably not understanding how really tight this was, because the timing and the onboard showed you just how much they were really trying to eke out every little bit on every little lap and trying to make minor adjustments to eke out tenths and hundredths. And it's really came down to that throughout the course of this race. So Cody, take us through it.
So Max Verstappen gets off in the lead to start the race, and he had really angled his car toward that inside line so that he could do his best to cut off Lando Norris going into that first turn, which is what happened. And then there really wasn't a whole lot that happened between those front three up until the first pit stop. But as I said earlier, I was kind of on the edge of my seat with tense all throughout this anyway, because there wasn't really ever a big gap that opened up. Max was starting to pull out a little bit, and I was thinking, okay, if he can just keep opening up the gap, it'll be smooth sailing. And I don't know if it was just trying to conserve the tires because they weren't really sure how much they were going to wear down, or just otherwise trying to maintain pace, but he never really got further than 2 seconds out in front of Lando. It would get to that 2 seconds, and it would shrink a little, and it would grow a little, and it would shrink a little, and I was like, God, just, open it up so I don't have to worry about him getting into DRS zone or, DRS range if you make a tiny mistake. Also, throughout the whole race, Oscar Piastri was staying right on Lando, often within Lando's DRS. It seemed like he would get into Lando's DRS. He would do all he could to try to keep up and, try to get close and put a move on him. I think he only really had one point in the whole race where he looked like he was going to maybe think about trying to move. But like we said, with how hard it is to pass here, you really have to make a huge gain on the driver in front of you to even have a chance at getting it in the DRS zone. And he just didn't quite get there. There was a lot of talk, especially, between pundits, if they should have switched drivers so that Oscar Piastri could have a chance to try to make a move on Max. I personally don't think that was really warranted, or, was even really had a case to be made for it, because Oscar was trying to make the move on Lando and he couldn't get that done. So I don't think he would have been able to get the move done on Max. I don't think that was, I think Lando was pushing as hard as he could. I just think he wasn't quite ever going to get there. And I don't even know that Oscar would have had any more luck, because he couldn't get the move done on Lando, and Max was even further up there. So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very frustrating onboards to watch because, and a very frustrating timing to watch, at least from my perspective, because you could tell that there were clearly parts of the track where the McLaren could claw back on Max. And there were clearly parts of the track where Max could open up seemingly just about any time he really wanted to. The part where I think everybody's making the call, I think was about 14 or 15 laps to go. It's right about where the gap is, right about 2.5 seconds between Lando and Max. And now Oscar's in the DRS. And you did mention the one move. There was one point on the timing. I always said on timing, when you see .01, it usually means they're really close to side by side. And I was kind of watching and I'm waiting like, okay, we're either going to see it change or they're both going to fall way down the timing. And then I'm going to throw something.
No, they kept it clean,
but
for
they
what
did.
it was
They kept
worth.
it. Yes, all of the racing standards throughout. Everybody was incredibly clean, and even the one sort of drama point at the pit stop where Lando went into the grass. I actually think Max's engineer called it right. Lando kind of drove himself into the grass and admitted to so afterwards. So, not investigated, no steward's action, none of that other stuff. So that was all fine. But
I don't
what
even really think that Lando at the end of the race really thought that anything wrong had occurred there. They were joking about it, and they were making the jibes about how he was, mowing the lawn out there because it needed it and all that. But yeah, he came out right next to Max, just behind him, which you could almost consider to be a bit of an unsafe release. So McLaren maybe got away with that a little bit, but
here's what I thought. I thought Max he never comes out of the fast lane. He never crosses into the part where there's a safety problem. Did he give Lando room to get in alongside him at the end of the pit lane? Fuck no. And nor should he at that point. So I do think it was kind of like, okay, if you're going to rail on Max for not exactly letting Lando in, that's fine. And if you're going to rail on Lando for being kind of dumb and going into the grass, that's also fine. The two dumb things kind of canceled each other out as far as I was concerned. And I think we just kind of all collectively move on from that. But to the point where I know a lot of people, and when we get to the fan emails, this seems to be a big talking point. I thought if there was going to be a switch call, even if they were going to swap it back later, it probably would have had to have been with like 15 to 18 laps to go, because Oscar was going to need to get wowed up enough to try to get into that DRS. And the other part that happened was every time Oscar would get that close, Lando would lift his pace just that little bit. And then all of a sudden, Oscar was out of DRS range. So it kind of took care of itself. I mean, I get the critique of, if you wanted to see them go after Max to get the win, were they willing to sacrifice the double podium to do it? And the answer clearly here was no. What I'm going to tell you is this is who the McLaren team is. They value the constructors. They value maximizing the most that they can out of the race they have. I can understand the frustration, because I felt it too, where it's like, if you tried to stretch out, maybe you get more. And that they even said, why did they pull Piastri in first? Was because they were worried about the potential pace of George Russell. Now, to me, that was completely wrong. I'm like, that was one of my, like, that was the point where I'm like, what are you doing? Like, come on. Don't do this again. He's not a threat. There's 3 cars in between the two of them, and there's no way he's making up that gap to you. Stop it. Stop it. Your car's quicker. But the other part was, I lost my train of thought. But anyway, I'll find it later. But
so frustrated by that strategy call. The one that
no. Now I remember. The part that I got it on the pit stop was, I was shocked that they followed Max in.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because they had tried this in other places where they gave Lando the clean air and they said this would be your race. This was where it was going to be. And with the DEG being as low as it was, I would have thought the call would have been box opposite whatever Max does that lap. If Max stayed out, then you come in, you try the undercut, you see what you roll your dice, you take your chances. If Max boxes like he does, get that car as so good in clean air and give him 2-3 laps. And hey, if the overcut works, great, then you've got it. And if not, then you're right back where you were. And I think what they were trying to do is they thought their pit stops were going to be better, and they got the second back. It just wasn't enough.
Mm-hmm. That pit stop was really, I think, what sealed the deal for Max. He got out in front of Lando. It was going to be really hard for Lando to overtake him on the same compound, same age tires. especially since Lando's got to run in dirty air. Even if he was in DRS range, you can only be that close before your tires start to heat up, and you have to let off and fall back a little, let everything cool off, let your batteries recharge so you can get another shot. And I agree with you that I think they should have, when Max came in there, they should have maybe let Lando stay out, because you're taking a big risk by pitting them at the same time, because these pit crews are so good at what they do, and they're very infrequently making any errors that are going to cost more than a second. And so you're really relying on your pit crew doing that much better a job than the Red Bull crew to try to get him out in front. I think that was riskier than, leaving him out for another couple laps where we've seen the low deg, where maybe in the clean air he gets something out of it and he's able to pick that up on Max that way. I don't know how well the undercut would have worked, because a lot of the teams were saying that they wanted to extend their stints, because since the tire deg was so low and there is just the one DRS zone, that the pack was staying pretty closely grouped together. So there wasn't really any good openings to pit and come out into. You're almost certainly going to be coming out in some form of like dirty air or traffic. And so if they tried the undercut, you might have run into that issue. But they were in a position to try the overcut, and they just didn't take it. I think they were a little too conservative.
Yeah, like I was going to say, if there's a critique to make, I think that's where you can make it, because we've seen them in other places value that clean air, and it's clear. Like, again, understand what you have in your car. Your car is awesome if it is in clean air, but you got to get it into the clean air to really ratchet it out of there, and you just couldn't do it. And then, to Max's credit, however he was attacking that hairpin, both McLarens were suffering a lot because of just that part of the lap. And yeah, you'd watch it. Lando would get, like, he would set purple in the first sector, and you watch it go 1.8, 1.6, 1.4. I'm like, all right, we're going to get to the DRS. This is the lap. It's finally going to happen. And you get down to 1.2, and they get to the hairpin, and you watch it go 1.4, 1.6. And then you watch the lap time at the end, and Max's would be like a 33.7, and Lando's would be a 33.6.5 or something like that. And it's like, they're quicker, but they were never going to get there. Unless they wanted to add 20 laps to the end of the race to see if Max's tires would eventually fall off, which they obviously didn't. And I kind of said it after the pit stop. I'm like, well, if Max can hang this out with 30-lap-old hard tires, he deserves the win. And he did, and he did.
And it was awesome. I was very happy to see the win. I was kind of starting to wonder how long it was going to take Max to get a win, considering it's very clear that they don't have the best car. But yeah, he managed to surprise everyone with this one. And I think if he can, what really gets me here too is, we had discussed this on the preview, that Max has historically done very well at Suzuka. With his race today, he's won 4 times in a row at Suzuka. Yeah. And before, they didn't run the race in 2020 and 2021 because of COVID stuff. But in the races he did before that, he had like 1 retirement and like a second, a third. So he's really good here. But McLaren had said that they thought that Suzuka really suited their car. And, they looked very strong here, but they still didn't get the win. So to me, that does speak volumes that we're at a track that McLaren feels really suits them, and they couldn't get the win. I think that means that Max can really get the win anywhere. As things stand right now, he's going to have to move heaven and earth to do it. And I don't know how often that can happen, even with his skill level, but it's possible to take the wins away from McLaren, even on a day where they don't really mess up.
I think that is the long-term question. I think that is the question. Do we have that scenario, or was this Max is great at this track? He's clearly got history here. It is a driver's track. Max is undoubtedly probably still the most raw talented driver on the grid, all company included at this point. And I'm not surprised that if he was going to get a win early, that this would have been where it would have come. Once I kind of saw that the McLarens weren't, even though they were leading all of the practice sessions, they were not a dominant force. And you could definitely see how the qualifying was set up. And then obviously when Max does his thing in the qualifying lap, I even said, well, this is going to be a tough race because I don't know where the overtake is going to happen if it doesn't happen on the first lap. And then when it didn't, and even Lando mentioned in the cool down room, he thought he got a pretty good start. They both did. Everybody got fairly really good starts. There was not a mistake made. This was not Lando threw the start away. This was not Oscar got anybody on the start or any of that. They all did their jobs according to exactly what they were supposed to do. It was just really, really tough to overtake. And it was a race where I think the top six that finished in qualifying all finished in the same order in the race. And we haven't seen that since a Monaco. So I'm not comparing Suzuka to Monaco. I know that there were some people that were going to say, you're going to do the comparison to Suzuka to Monaco. We are not going to do that. Suzuka should stay on the calendar. But I just think this was a lot of different circumstances that all added up to whoever was going to be in pole was going to have, I think I'd say, an 88% chance to win the race.
Yeah.
And Max got there on Saturday, and that's why I think he ended up winning on Sunday.
I guess if there's anything else, too, that lends toward that maybe this was something of a one-off for the Red Bull was that what we saw in Australia, especially, was that the tire deg on the Red Bull is quite a bit worse than McLaren. McLaren seems to have done a really good job with being able to make their tires last. And that didn't really come into play so much here because everyone's tire deg was really, really low. So I'm sure we're going to get a better read on that when we go to the next race in Bahrain, where there's quite a bit more tire deg.
Yeah, there will be deg in Bahrain. They have not touched that track in 15 years. It is sanded weekly with the sandstorms. You're going to go from the exact polar opposites in terms of tires and degradation. And I guarantee you, I would be shocked if that's not a two-stopper coming next week. But I guess we will leave the Japanese GP here for the time being. We're going to take a quick break. We'll re-rack our stuff. We're going to come back. We will recap where all the points are. It has definitely gotten tighter in the drivers for sure. We will recap where the team standings are. There are some gaps opening up in the team standings for sure. And then we're going to open it up to your takes on what you saw the weekend in the fan email segment. Our regulars have stepped up and done a great job. Again, we've got some really good questions here. We'll hand out some awards. I'll try not to scream too much into the mic when we get to the rubbish award. I've already kind of warned Cody about this. There was a certain guy on Sky TV this weekend, and if you've got any familiarity with the show, you probably know where this is going. And God, is he annoying. So anyway, we'll get into all of that in just a little bit, and then we'll recap the predictions. I've gotten off to a pretty good start. I was up 2-0. Is that still the case after this weekend? Come on back and find out. You are listening to the Outlap F1 podcast, and we'll be right back after this quick pit stop. Grab your flu powder, broomstick, or apparate to your favorite audio streaming service to join the discussion on Hogwarts, a podcast, where Dan and his friends have in-depth chapter-by-chapter breakdowns of each Harry Potter novel. Join the group as they dive into the magical world and discuss plot points, analyze character development, and occasionally go off the rails. Whether you're a muggle who's new to the series or a pure-blood wizard who won't need a remember-all, Hogwarts, a podcast, brings everyone to the Great Hall for a magical discussion. Hogwarts, a podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back on in. This is season 7, episode number 7 of the Outlap F1 podcast. It's our 2025 Japanese GP review show. You've got Andy and I'm along with Cody tonight, and we just wrapped up talking about that aforementioned Japanese GP. So now we're going to take a look at where all the points shake out after round 3 of the 2025 F1 season. As always, Cody, if you want to do the drivers, I will take the teams.
All right, Lando Norris, still the points leader, 3 races into the championship. And honestly, bar that, kind kind of subpar sprint race in China. He's had a really good run so far. 1 win, 2 second places, and at least points in the sprint. So he is in the lead for McLaren at 62 points. However, after Max's win this weekend, that gap has closed right up. Max is in second for Red Bull at 61 points. I'm not sure that I really believed that there would only be a 1-point gap between the two of them 3 rounds in, but here we are. Oscar Piastri also doing very well in the beginning of the season here. He's in third place in McLaren at 49 points, so just a little bit of a gap there, mostly because of his misfortunes in Australia. Just behind him, George Russell, who just kind of seems to always be there, picking up the points that he can, because he's really not that far behind Oscar. He's in fourth for Mercedes at 45 points. And then Kimi Antonelli, showing very well for the rookie that he is. He is in fifth place in the other Mercedes at 30 points. Charles Leclerc in sixth place for Ferrari at 20 points, mostly hamstrung by the fact that he had that disqualification in China. Alex Albon in seventh place. Surprisingly, only 2 points behind Charles Leclerc due to that disqualification, and also ahead of Lewis Hamilton at this point in the championship. When was the last time he had a Williams ahead of Ferrari? I mean, it's a little crazy here, but you got Alex in seventh with Williams at 18 points. You got Lewis Hamilton in eighth place in that other Ferrari with 15 points. Esteban Ocon holding on to ninth place for the time being, and Haas with 10 points, and tied with him on points is Lance Stroll in Aston Martin, also with 10 points. Didn't pick up any of those this weekend, though.
Yeah, he was in the Liam Lawson seat in P20 the entirety of the weekend. So we'll have to see what happens at Aston Martin moving forward there. I don't expect any movement, but who knows? The second, I don't think that, again, this is a weekend where you think you know, and then you don't know. But what I do know is where the teams are. And in P1, despite not getting the win here, they do open up a gap in the constructors. That is McLaren, Mercedes. They check in now with 111 points, thanks to the double podium this weekend. Mercedes are only up to 75. So that is now a much bigger gap than what it was. P3 on the strength. This should just say Max Verstappen at this point. Red Bull Racing checking in with 61 points. They are all Max's points. No surprise there. P4 is the Ferraris. They're up now to 35 points after getting successfully scoring points with both cars this weekend. P5 is Williams. As we've said before, they are not going anywhere anytime soon. They are up to 19 points. Alex Albon doing a great job for them, and Carlos Sainz struggling a little bit, but still managing to score at least one solitary point so far in the first 3 races. P6 is Haas. Ollie Behrman's 1 point brings their total up to 15 points. P7 is Aston Martin. They check in on the strength still of all of Lance Stroll. He is still their bannerman with those 10 points. P8 is Racing Bulls. P9 is now Kick Sauber. Because of the Nico Hulkenberg thing in the rain in Melbourne, but they did get some more points than they got all last year, so there's something. And still in P10, no points yet. Alpine continuing to struggle out of the gate early. All right, well, you have heard our takes on the Japanese GP that was. It is now time for us to turn it over to you guys in the fan email segment. We've got some really good comments here. Rachel Fleming, Dave Doherty, and of course, Mr. Formula, who've all checked in. Cody, your time to shine here, sir. What do we got?
All right. Our first fan email comes in from Rachel Fleming. Thank you, Rachel. And she says, so that was a really frustrating watch. It wasn't a particularly great race, but I was more annoyed with McLaren for not trying to get Max with both cards. They could have left either Norris or Piastri out longer and tried that, and Lando pushed, but he pushed too late. Quite frankly, I would have swapped Oscar and Lando to see if Oscar could do it, but McLaren didn't do this either. So it led to a Max victory, played badly by McLaren. Alonso watch, he finished, but outside the points. Sauber watch, didn't show much pace, but didn't come last. A good weekend for Ollie Behrman, beating Ocon and getting the maximum out of the Haas. And Jack Doohan a little stuffed over this weekend by his team, both in free practice 1 and in the race, but his big error in free practice 2 wouldn't have impressed anyone. Is it a case of when rather than if he is replaced by Colapinto now? I guess we'll start with the last bit there on Jack Doohan. I think we've all kind of believed for even before the season started that the writing might already be on the wall with Colapinto coming in and taking that seat, unless Jack Doohan really showed something special. And he hasn't been awful, I would say, but he really hasn't shown anything monumental either. So I think his time to prove himself is running out. Uh, it that first that crash that he had in free practice 2 was pretty scary. I was reading that even with the runoff area slowing down the car a little bit, it was still something like a 50 G impact. So yeah, really wrecked the car. Glad he's not injured, but yeah, that type of mistake where that much repair is going to be needed on that car, it's not going to make the team very happy. Going backwards from there, Ollie Behrman, yep, showing very good. One of the other very impressive rookies out on the track right now. And the rest of the stuff there, I think we pretty much covered the McLaren stuff in depth and how we thought that they could have tried something a little different with the strategy, but they didn't. And it just, in their defense, yes, they were very conservative on the strategy, but it was going to be really hard to get past Max anyway with the track conditions. And yeah, very happy that Alonso actually finished this race. Would have liked it if he did get some points, but just wasn't to be quite yet.
Yeah, I mean, we've already kind of touched on the McLaren stuff. I agree that I would have loved to have seen them at least give one of the cars a shot in some clean air and seen how that might have played out. Boxing opposite Verstappen, I think, was the call, not to just necessarily follow him in, because and again, it's such a quick decision whether or not it was, they thought because they had the position in the garages that they thought that they could somehow, if Lando's right on Max's tail as they go into the pit lane, which is kind of where they were, does the pit work enable them to somehow jump Max at that point? That seemed to be what they were going for. We talked about Lando ended up in the grass and, doing some expensive lawn cutting because of it, but nothing really came out of it. So, yeah, if that was the play, I don't think that was the right play either. I would agree with that. I think that is a fair critique. But when they didn't do the switch with about 14 or 15 laps to go, that was pretty much, I think, the last window to do it, because after that, the gaps were too close. And you kept thinking Lando might just get there. He just never could. But it wasn't for a lack of trying or a lack of trying to lift pace. They both did. But it just proved, I think at the end of the day, the high ground is the clean air. And so, I'll take the critique of, yeah, they didn't let any of their cars into the clean air. Maybe they should have. That's fair. But I didn't think that they were going to successfully pull off. I mean, can we count on one hand the times when a team has done a swap when they said, well, I'll let the other guy go after the guy in front because we think he's faster? When has that worked? I'm trying to remember the last time I even saw that working.
It's very rare. And then you've got that whole can of worms that opens up where you let the other guy in front and you tell the guy that they went past, oh, if he can't go get him, he'll let you back past at the end of the race. And then you got to pray to God that they don't go, you know what, I was faster, I'm going to keep this spot, screw you. And then you have to debrief that. So I think not swapping the cars was fine. I don't think Oscar was going to get there. And there's the worry that he would not have let Lando back by. We've seen that Oscar can be kind of ruthless.
Yep,
so
yep.
I guess at this point in the season, best not to find out.
And and that's a great point that I hadn't even really thought of, that potentially being the scenario. Could we have seen a reverse Hungary where they're yelling at Oscar to try to give the position back and he's not able to or doesn't? and then you've got a whole other can of worms that you're now unwrapping, and now you're in the crosshairs for all of the wrong reasons. So there's a lot to it. And the lizard part of my brain, like I said, with about 15 or 16 laps to go, I think it was even when Lando came on the radio and says, why am I so shit in the hairpin? I just can't nail this corner. And they tried to give him some settings to change, and it got a little bit better. I thought, like, okay, I literally almost said to myself, I'm like, okay, if they're going to try this, it's got to be now. And then every time my brain would say, do it now, Lando would lift his pace. So I don't think you could have. I think for a lot of reasons, I think there's a reason why they didn't. And it's yet another convenient excuse not to put the team order thing in the crosshairs of everybody who wants to do nothing but talk about the team order thing. So I think they were just like, oh, it's a marriage of convenience. We get all these points in the constructors and we're happy. And we have now big point in the lead in the constructors. I'm doing my Andrea Stella impression here. But Jack Doohan, we talked about him when he had the crash. I don't think he's getting any favors from his team, and he's not doing himself any favors by trying a trick that, quite frankly, I don't know why you try on your first flying lap to try that trick. Just get a feel for the car, get your laps in, get what the tires are doing. If you're going to try that and if it's the end of Q1 and you're not you're in the bottom 5, maybe that's when you pull that thing out and you see if it works. Not in free practice, too, when it's your second flying lap in the car. And I think he learned that lesson, and it certainly sounded like he learned that lesson. He was very contrite about it, kind of after the race. So we'll see kind of where that goes.
Yep. Thank you, Rachel. Our next email comes in from Dave Doherty. Thank you, Dave. And he says, hi, team. Well, that was a pleasant surprise to see Max back from quali day to race day. Do you think Red Bull will be back in the fight, or is this a one-off? I thought Tsunoda was pretty much good in the Red Bull, and I love that Kimi was leading the race for a bit. I hope Mercedes can do better in the next race. Yeah, that's a little bit of trivia for you, that Kimi Antonelli is now I believe the youngest driver ever to lead a race. I guess they were saying on the broadcast that this was his last chance to become the youngest driver to win a race, which that record is held by Max Verstappen. So cannot take that record away from Max anymore. But he does now hold the record for the youngest driver to lead the Grand Prix. And it was cool to see him up there for a little while. I'm sure we're going to see that with much more consequence at some point down the road. On the topic of Red Bull being back in the fight, or is this a one-off? We were kind of starting to touch on that before. I don't think that, at least with Max Verstappen, I don't think he's been out of the fight this season so far. He's capitalized where he can. It is really cool now that he actually has a race win to show for it. He's only 1 point behind Lando. So he's just as much in it as he's ever been. It's just, I think the question is how many times can he pull these crazy performances out of the car as it is and outdo McLaren, which is still clearly the best car in my opinion. It's really too early in the season to say. I don't think this is a one-off. We discussed how that this track and the conditions at the track really played into the hands of Max and Red Bull. And we might not see that come together for them as much in the next few races, but there's a long season where they can choose to develop the car or not develop the car because they want to put the money into next year's car, which is going to be very different. I think it's still too early to tell if this was a one-off or if they're going to be consistently fighting for the wins again. I'm going to put it at probably, I don't know. I would say probably when they get past those first 8 races where they have to stop using the flexi front wings, I think we're going to see a lot of teams bring upgrades if they're going to bring them at that point. And I think that'll be really where we see if it's going to stay very competitive. But I wouldn't be surprised if over like the next 5 races, if McLaren does start to open up more of a gap in the drivers.
Yeah, I think this is the fascinating question. It's a question that I think coming into the weekend, we didn't think we were going to get to pose. So, that's a good thing. That just in itself, the fact that we're asking questions about the Drivers' Championship, it is endemically, I think, for the sport, a very good thing. And Max I am finding it a lot more pleasant to watch Max having to do this. At least as I'm not always his biggest fan, but I know talent and respect stuff when I see it. And like I said, I just got to tip my cap for that qualifying lap because, like I said, it's going to be one of those things you're going to replay and it's going to be memed, and all of that is deserved because of the effort that guy put into it this weekend. And even from Friday to Saturday to Sunday, that car made a lot of strides on the Max side. Still got to get the other side to do something. But I don't know. And I guess that's kind of the thing, that these next at least 2 races are going to kind of play out. And then after that, when we get the next set of races are going to play out, was this the one-off? Is this just Max is so great around Suzuka because Max is great at Suzuka? Or are they solving some of the endemic issues with the car and Max is up there every race? He was there in Australia, but that was weather. I would give that an incomplete. I couldn't tell. China felt a little bit more according to plan, but Max was not very far off of, from that either. And then here, yeah, he overcame it and got the car to the front. So yeah, my feeling on that is question mark. If he's in the fight or is it a one-off? He's in the fight as of right now, and he's not. And look, we've all seen the competitive nature of Max Verstappen. He's not going to let that thing go until it is wrestled out from his fingers, and even once after that. So it is not a done fight by any stretch of the imagination. He's definitely back in it right now. And if you're a Red Bull fan, that's what you should think. You should think that he's back in the fight and that the next race is an opportunity to try to do this again.
I sure hope so. Thank you, Dave. And our last email comes in from the Formula. Thank you, Mr. Formula. And he says, once again, I had to watch on demand. Having toddlers is not conducive to being an F1 fan, let me tell you. That was a good weekend for McLaren, but they're dealing with the GOAT. Andy, I had this conversation with you earlier, but I am now pretty confident in calling Max the best ever. Ooh. I used to give that title to Jim Clark and Senna equally, but this weekend was just otherworldly from Max. Also, did you catch that new camera angle facing to the inner part of the front wheel brake duct area on Alonso's car? It was an odd choice for a camera cut as it didn't show much of anything of interest. Also, I do think there was a brief window where McLaren should have considered letting Oscar go after Max. If he couldn't overtake, then swap back again to let Lando get P2. All right. It is always a little scary when you try to name the GOAT, because you're always going to piss off somebody. Honestly, I think your choice of having Jim Clark in there for the GOAT is a pretty fun take. I'm with the nature of Formula One and how much it has changed over the 75 years that it's existed. I think it's really, really difficult to name the GOAT. I think you can certainly name the greatest of a generation, and I would certainly say that Max is the greatest of his generation, just like Lewis Hamilton's the best of his generation, Michael Schumacher, Ayrton Senna, Lauda, Prost, Clark. Like you could make that argument for any of them that they were the greatest at the time that they were driving. But even with how much I like Max and how crazy his performances are, it's still a little scary to try to call him the GOAT because I don't want any Lewis Hamilton fans coming and finding me and beating me up. So, but
Yeah,
I do agree that he is awesome.
I'm more of an era person and I think you use the word generation. I think it's much more of an era because obviously Max and Lewis are racing against each other.
Yeah, they overlap.
Yeah, but I think in Lewis's era, he was just as dominant as anybody else. And some of that was the technology, some of that was the car, but a lot of that was also Lewis and just the stuff that he could do with the car. There were things that he was able to do that have my jaw on the floor. I referenced the Singapore lap. That's one of those moments, the same type of thing where it's like, how did he do that? Like you just look at the time and you go, how did he do that? And recently, I would say, I think in terms of the most amount of driving talent, I would give it to Max Verstappen, even in this era, even though he's not leading the drivers at the current moment. But I mean, 4 consecutive drivers' championships kind of speaks for itself. There really isn't anything more you can say about it. And the season in 2023 was just on another universe that we may never, ever, ever see that level of dominance ever again. Because I think they'll make it by regulation. They just won't allow it to happen. So I
It's
don't think you're
probably for the
ever.
best.
Yeah, no, I agreed, but I don't think you're ever going to see anything like that. So there are, at least now, there are some foils in Max's life that he has to kind of deal with, if nothing else. And we're going to see over the course of this season if Lando and Oscar can turn into true opponents for Max, and where that happens in the drivers. And we got a long way to go before we get to those answers. So that's going to be a lot of fun to have that revealed over the course of the season. So yeah, I mean, I'm much more of an era. Senna in his era, Senna and Prost were 1 and 1A. I mean, they're good in different ways. They were both awesome at what they did and awesome in different, almost 180-degree opposites, but they managed to still kind of get the same results. So it was fascinating to watch that. I never got the chance to see much of Jim Clark or the the 70s battles between Ferrari and McLaren during that era, and Niki Lauda and all that other stuff. So I mean, there's a lot, and I think in his era, in this era of regulation, until someone rips it from Max, this is going to be the Max Verstappen era, and I think that kind of says all you need to know about where his talent is, at least at this point.
Now, for the camera angle thing, I did not personally notice that camera angle or notice that it was new. However, you're talking about camera angles did remind me of something in the race that kind of irked me a little bit. And that was the only really exciting part of the race was where Max and Lando pit at the same time, and they really dropped the ball on the direction for that part, because first of all, I see on the timing feed that they're both in the pits, and I'm like, oh my God, show it. And then they finally do. And as they're pulling out of the pits, like next to each other, they pan to Charles Leclerc's pit stop. And I was like, no, show it. And then they pan it back and Lando's already in the grass. And I was like, son of a gun, like, why? Like, it's the two leaders in the pits at the same time. Just focus on that. That's what we want to see. So I found that to be frustrating because, it's like I said, it was like the exciting part of the race, and we didn't even get to see good parts of it. So it was a little strange there. But I'm always down for trying new camera angles. Probably my favorite one is that one where they kind of have the camera like over the front wing with the nose next to it, and they're showing like data in front of the front wing for like speed and stuff like that. I think that camera angle is really cool. But I did not catch this one that they used on Fernando Alonso's car.
Yeah, I'm racking my brain trying to remember if I saw it, and I'm drawing a blank. To be honest with you, I probably didn't, and for that I apologize that I didn't. I will look for it next time if they intend to use it again, and I'll try to give my thoughts on when I actually see it. But part of the thing that sometimes frustrates me about how they do the onboards is you can control whose onboard you're watching, but you cannot control what you're watching on the onboard. And case in point, there were, I think, 7 to 10 laps where all they did was show Oscar Piastri's face on his onboard. I don't know if somebody fell asleep or didn't hit the button to go back to the main view or what. And I get like they have to sync it up with like if they're going to use the feed, and I can kind of tell when they're going to do it. But once he's off the main feed, go back to the base angle, would you please, across the board? Because otherwise, like there are times when that's the proper angle and there's a great perspective that gives you, but I don't know where he is on the track. I don't know who's around him. I don't know if he's going through traffic. I don't know any of it other than looking at the timing screen. And in this new F1 TV, since they've done the updates to the new tier, the timing is about 45 seconds in front of F1 TV. So even if I'm watching the onboard, it's kind of a bit anticlimactic. Like I knew Max had gotten in front of Lando at the pit stop, even though they're finally showing it on TV. I'm like, okay, now we're going to find out how and why. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, should I be mad at the Lando drove in the grass? That was kind of my reaction to it. But the drama of that moment had already kind of gone because I was already kind of looking at it on the timing. I think if the production as a whole, if they can sync the timing up to the pictures, it's going to go a lot better, I think, for the overall fan experience when you're trying to merge all of those together. Because I got multiple screens going on and multiple devices. It's just kind of a frustration that I have. But I did not catch that particular angle. I will look for it next time. And we've already kind of talked about the McLaren stuff.
Oh, yeah, I think we kind of beat that one to death already.
Yeah.
But we will keep an eye out for that camera angle. Thank you, Mr. Formula. Thanks to everyone who continues to contribute to the show. Love hearing from these guys. We get Rachel, Dave, and Mr. Formula contributing on the regular. So thank you very much. Love hearing from you guys.
Yeah. And if you guys have a thought, we are kind of curating the Blue Sky channel. Feel free to shoot us a message over there. That's how Dave shot his message over to us. Also on X or whatever's left of that platform. We will take questions from all comers. So, and if you guys have a question when we're getting ready for a preview, feel free to lay us a question too. We answered one of those. It doesn't have to be necessarily about the weekend coming. It can be just a general F1 question. We're happy to dig in and try to figure that kind of stuff out. So, I actually have a question like that into a group that I talk to about Pirelli and how much notice they get when a track gets resurfaced, because it clearly looked like what Pirelli had set up for was the traditional Suzuka of, it was going to eat a tire eating circuit, 2 stops, mandatory, all of that. And then it just didn't happen. And I'm wondering how quickly they got notified that, hey, we're going to take the part that eats up all the tires and resurface it and take a lot of that bite out. Now, could Pirelli have done anything about it? Maybe not, because I think they have to commit that like 7-8 months in advance. But it doesn't look good on television when you have 4 overtakes on a circuit that probably could have a couple more. So
yeah, it'd be funny
it's a
if
question
that
I have into some people too.
Yeah, it'd be funny if that happens, and you've got that one guy Pirelli looking at this like way in advance, being like, "Well, that one's going to be boring as hell."
And it's like, well, literally, the ship has probably sailed, and the tires are on their way, and there's no way to undo that at that point. But thank you to everybody who interacts with us over the course of the weekend. Thank you to everybody who interacted with us during the live quali stuff. I don't know if Cody, if you experienced the same thing, but at least at the beginning of qualifying, F1 TV apparently decided to go away for about 10 minutes there. And I was on my backup systems. I could not, it would load, but I was still getting, all the channels said that the coverage had concluded, like it was the end screen. And then it kicked back about maybe 5 minutes into Q1. They finally got it going. And everybody was up and going, but I don't know if you got affected by that or not.
No, I didn't have any issues at all through either day. It just worked like a charm.
Well, we're happy for you. Let's put it that way. All right. So now we're going to get into our awards, and we will start with the rubbish. I've got a bit laid out here. Cody, I'll let you go first. What you got?
My rubbish award is going to someone who I have awarded the rubbish award to many times before. It's going to Lance Stroll, and it's not even directly picking on him. I think this time, we gave him some praises, minor ones at that, but we did give him some praises over the first 2 weekends for actually being the Aston Martin driver who was scoring points and finishing the races. And I don't know if they were trying some kind of different setup on the car or what, but he qualified dead last. And even in that qualifying session, he was something like, let's see here, like 4/10 off of the next slowest, Jack Doohan. So very poor qualifying performance and couldn't do anything with it in the race. After that, the only guy to get lapped, it was actually a little comical when he got lapped because it was right down that main straight, I believe. So he pulled way off to the side and slowed way down so that all three of the top runners could get by him at the same time, which I guess is what you're supposed to do. But it did look a little goofy. And for his sake, I really hope that maybe this was just a one-off and they were doing weird stuff with the car, because as much as it is easy to hate on Lance Stroll because he's super rich and his dad is super duper rich and owns the team, and we know that he's never going to get fired because of that, I do still want him to succeed. I want it to be interesting. I don't want Alonso just to wipe the floor with him. It would be cool to see some actual competition going on there.
It's possible. I mean, right now, we look at the points. Lance Stroll has all 10 of them, so it's a weird situation happening at Aston Martin, going on for sure. So I have an on track and an off track rubbish. My on track are 2 candidates, one of which you said correctly, Lance Stroll. My other one, unfortunately, has to go out to Jack Doohan. You try something in a simulator, that's great. You can manipulate computer code to kind of do a lot of things that you want. One of the things I've started watching is some of these guys who play some of the old 8-bit Nintendo games, and they do what's called a speed run. And I'm watching them use the little tricks and, little manipulations and clickers off in the corner to time just the right frame right. And you can do that in the virtual world. All of that is great. But in the real world, when you're driving a car down a straight at going close to 200 miles an hour, it can bite you. And Jack Doohan got bit. And it is an unfortunate lesson that I think he had to learn. And it sucks because I felt really bad as to what his team is doing to him and then what he ended up doing to himself. So he compounded the problem. So into the rubbish bin with both of you this weekend for your on-track performance. Off the track, Sky Sports. What in the name of hell are you doing dragging out Captain Hot Take Jacques Villeneuve again for the weekend and putting him not only on all of the recaps, but in basically the Brundle seat for the main international broadcast? What are you doing? He's every time I watch him, I try to say the same thing. I'm like, all right, calm down. You're going to have to deal with the fact that he's here. Maybe he won't piss you off so much. It got to the point I got to qualifying, and it was after that he did the praise on Max Verstappen, and he said something about Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari that was insanely stupid. He goes, well, because Lewis has won the sprint race in China, he now owns that team. What? Where are you even getting that idea from? It's like having the AI bot F1 troll turned up to 10 and it making no sense. None of what he was saying made a whole lot of sense. And the fact that they put him on there in the prime position at a track that's got so much history and everybody loves to watch, just why? Why could we not have had Martin Brundle in the studio at least, even if he doesn't want to travel? Could we not have gotten they had Anthony Hamilton, which was, or not Anthony Hamilton, the other driver. Shoot, I can't forget the name because I'm all flustered here. But anyway, they had him on, and he was doing good perspective. But and they had Naomi Schiff there, and she was doing good, a decent job. But my God, get this guy off. Contrast that with what F1 TV did with Chris Medland, who is a guy who's been a journo in that paddock for a long time. He's grinded his stuff out. It's a guy that I have a ton of respect for. I retweet his stuff all the time because he's an honest guy and he gives it to you straight. And they had that guy on F1 TV, and I got to tell you, after watching both of them, F1 TV wiped the floor with Sky this weekend. Wasn't even close. So just do better. You go out to you're running the international broadcast, for crying out loud. It goes out to billions upon billions of people. Do better than Jacques Villeneuve. Get him off of there. God.
I loved getting the text from you being like, I just need to let you know that Jacques Villeneuve was on Sky again, and I'm going to rant about it. And I was like, you go for it, man. Like, we've been here.
I was a little snarky after about the 8th different hot take. And, look, I get the Lando Oscar thing is a talking point. I'm not going to shy away from that over the course of this season, despite the fact that I'm a big McLaren team guy and I believe in the team philosophy that they're doing. That having been said, when you try to make it to be like they're at each other's throats or they're waiting for one of the other ones to screw up so that they can pounce on the other one, that's just not how it is. It's I mean, it may play out and we may end up with some odd or cringy moments that we're going to have to deal with when we get there. But until we get there, stop making shit up. Just drives me
The
nuts.
worst that they did this weekend was Oscar saying, hey, I think I'm faster. Can I get past to take a stab at Max?
Right.
And they pretty much just said no.
Well, they didn't say anything. They didn't even say no. They just kind of said,
well, they said this is Lando's pace.
Lando's
and
pace.
Oscar's like, yeah, but I think I can go faster. And then nothing came of that. But yeah, I feel like maybe, you can take that and try to blow it out of proportion. But really, it's all drivers do that. If they've got a sniff, they're gonna be like, hey, can we trade positions? So I can try. They're all gonna try that. I don't think it's anything indicative of like they're at each other's throats and they're gonna, yeah.
So anyway, it just drives me crazy. Like, I'm sure he's going to be back for Canada. I'm going to have to take a deep breath for that. But goddamn, there's a lot of people out there who they've let go who bring a lot better perspective, in my opinion, than this guy. But whatever. All right, we'll move on to analysis paralysis. Yeah, I think we actually have some agreement here, maybe for different reasons. Cody, what you got here?
I don't think there was any extremely strong analysis paralysis out of this race. If I'm going to give it to anyone, I think I got to give it to McLaren, because I do think they had opportunities to try something different to go for the race win, and I don't think it would have even really cost them that much. I think that even if they had been less conservative with their strategy, I think they probably still would have ended up with second and third, even if it didn't go quite their way. But you got to really try something. If you're pitting Oscar to cover Russell, who's like way behind you, I mean, I got to think that even with how hard it was to pass here, that Oscar probably could have gotten past George Russell right now. And you're pitting Lando at the same time as Max, which at that point you're leaving it up to who can do the faster pit stop, where Max already has the advantage of coming in first. So your pit crew would have to do something outstanding to get past it at that point. I really do think that they could have tried something, and they just decided that they were okay with leaving it up to the pit stop or the drivers to get it done on track, and it just didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I will also kind of give the analysis paralysis to McLaren this weekend. You clearly know clean air is where it's at. And the fact that you didn't give either of your drivers a sniff at clean air, even if that would have meant hanging someone out. Like, okay, if you're going to pit Lando at the same moment that Max is pitting, you leave Oscar out to try to disrupt some of the air, and maybe he catches fire and the overcut works. And now it's a 1-3 with Max in the middle, and it's a different ball game with Max not in the clean air. That's what I think, given the situation, when you don't get him on lap one, and you didn't get like lap one, I did not expect there to be a lot of fireworks. And even right after Max got the pole, I said, okay, where this race is going to come down to is the end of the tire stints. If McLaren can make which is generally kinder on their tires, make them last that little bit longer than Max can. Max is going to have to box. The McLarens can get into clean air, and that's where the race is going to be won and lost. The fact that they didn't even try that is frustrating, and I get that as a fan. I also will tell you, this is they are who we thought they were. They're going to protect the P2 and the P3 almost at their peril. Uh, and sometimes we're going to get frustrated with them because they do that. Now, the natural fix to that is go blitz the qualifying next race and don't make this an issue and be in the clean air and control it from the start. That's how they fix it.
And they got the car to do that.
Yep. And we're going to see, if that Bahrain race run and testing was real, because that's where we're going next week. All right. So we'll move on to our dark horse of the day. I'll go first here. I'm going to give this to Oliver Bearman, so I get to finally get the chance to do my bear. Highly outshining his vastly experienced teammate this weekend. And an honorable mention to Isaac Hadjar, who, again, should have the respect of every Guy fan in Formula One after what he went through. Oh, bro, Population U.
Yes, I'm actually going to give my dark horse to Isaac Hadjar because, nut crunching aside, he did actually have a pretty good weekend and managed to get well into the points. 8th place is very good, especially for that Racing Bulls car, which we've seen has some serious potential in these first few races. And he outscored both his former teammate in Yuki Tsunoda and his new teammate in Liam Lawson. So, coming off of how rotten his first week in Formula One was, I would say this is quite the turnaround.
Yeah. And in the interviews, I have to say, he's a likable guy. I actually really have started to like him, and he's going to make that Racing Bulls team something that I can pull for, because he's got a very dynamic personality. He's a little bit reserved, but you can tell that he's not just happy to be there. He's wide-eyed. He looks like it sometimes, but I mean, there's a real personality there that's going to come out once he can kind of get his feet under him a little bit. So I'm intrigued on what Isaac Hadjar can do this season for sure. All right, so driver of the day, I don't think we're going to have any disagreement here. Cody, I'll let you take it right now. What you got?
There's no surprise that I'm going to give it to Max because he got the race win. Like, none of us saw it coming that he was going to get not only the pole, which was fantastic on its own, but then he managed to turn it into the race win. It didn't ever really look in that much jeopardy either. He just kept it out in front. Those McLaren cars couldn't quite get it done on this track and in the dirty air, and that's all he really had to do was just, go flat out and not make any mistakes for the entire race.
Yeah, do 53 perfect laps on a rear wing with half the downforce than your teammate, and he went out and did it. And like I said, if he could make a 30-lap stint on hard tires work, he deserved the win, and he did. So congrats to Max for this one. He gets my vote as well for driver of the day. With all respect for Yuki Tsunoda and for all of the fanfare related to that, his teammate was the one who got it done this weekend. So Max all the way there. All right, so we will turn to our predictions. Our poll time wasn't as bad as I thought it was. When I finally saw the tallies, I was like, we're still not quick enough, dang it, but we're getting there.
We're still like a half a second slow.
I know.
The fastest lap time, though, was when we were like way off.
The race pace was bad. But Cody, you take this weekend. You got 4 points. You got the pole time. You got P1 on the podium with Max. You got the fastest lap time. And you got the P9 bonus pick for Alex Albon. I rallied as much as I could, but only finished with 3 points. I got P3 on the podium for Oscar. I got the prop bet because we did not see the rain tire on Sunday, despite the fact that it rained in the morning. And I got the P4 bonus pick with Leclerc as my pick there, but it was not enough. However, I now am still maintaining a slight 2-1 lead after 3 rounds of our predictions game. So that championship is still way up in the air, and nobody's claimed it as of yet. to anyone who cares.
I care.
Besides the two of us. All right. So let's put the Japanese GP in our rearview mirror and appreciate all of what Max Verstappen did to make this championship and qualifying ridiculously interesting. We move on to where we tested. We go back to Bahrain. The good news is, at least if you're in the USA, you can actually watch your F1 in daylight for the first time. It's going to be a scary, scary concept not to be awake at 4 a.m. and not know what to do with oneself. But that's where we're going to find ourselves. The Bahrain GP awaits the proper race running. So we're going to try to hit you with a preview episode later on this week and get you all primed and ready to see if any big stories break. We actually did have one break while we were on the air tonight. Ryo Harikawa joins Haas as a reserve driver. So there's a bit of an advanced news story there. I just put that out as well. So stay tuned to our social media channels, mainly Blue Sky, mainly X, for any other news that breaks between now and then. Cody, any final thoughts as we wrap up Japan?
Just that I really hope to get to go see that race someday, especially now that it's in springtime, because I get to see those cherry blossoms. And yeah, looking forward to having Formula One back for the next couple weeks, because this is our first triple header of the year. Bahrain is where we tested, and then Saudi Arabia is the completely nutty super speed track where minor mistakes are going to absolutely destroy your car. So that one can be fun too, and I'm here for all of it.
And we're going to be around to cover it all. So we hope you join us as well. Thank you for, if you've made it this far into the recording, thank you so much for sticking with us through all of our results, through all of our awards, through all of our rantings and ravings and all that other good stuff. So for Cody, it's been Andy. We will catch you in a couple days for Bahrain. We're on the roller coaster as we are. And as always, folks, may all your laps be fast.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Outlap F1 podcast. If you like what you heard, click that subscribe button and be sure to leave us a 5-star review. If you want to connect with us outside of the show, check out our website at www.outlapf1.com. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at OutlapF1 Podcast, or email us at chatnow@outlapf1.com. As always, thank you so much for your support, and we'll see you on the next one.